Hey there nation, welcome to the show. We help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is now time for another edition of the Underhive Wars. This is our series of Necromunda battle reports. This is Necromunda battle report number 7 of that series. This is the third turn of our Peachtree Wars turf war, and this one is a border dispute scenario that is fought between my friends Brother Grimm of the Pelago-Slam Kings of House Goliath versus my other friend Sergeant Sigmary with his Sleeping Dogs of House Delaque. So these two gangs will be fighting each other for the very first time in the third cycle of our Peachtree's War. We're going to play some background music real quick. If you want to see exactly what each of these gangs are bringing, feel free to pause and check out your own leisure. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's get this battle report on a roll. Alright, so what the army list talked about, let's go and talk about the scenarios for this one. As you can see, we are fighting in the tombs. It's been a while since we've seen this little cavern of chaos that we've had in the last series of battle reports for our Tales in the Underhive. It's time we brought that back out, and we're going to use this one for our series for turn 3 for our battle reports. So this is a border dispute scenario, and the objective of the scenario is to destroy the rival gang's relic or drive them off. What ends up happening is you divide the entire table in half of the deployment area. One half belongs to one gang, the other half belongs to another gang, and both gangs set up a relic in their respective areas. So as you can see here in this table, my buddies decided to split it diagonally from the left corner to the right corner. Bottom left corner belongs to the Pelago-Slam Kings, while the top right corner belongs to the Sleeping Dogs. And then once again, basically how you end this off is, like I said before, is either drive off your enemy through bottle test or destroy the relic. The winning gang that wins the scenario steals D3 turf away from their enemy, so they add D3 turf to their own. Also, the winning gang also earns D6 times 10 creds if their relic was not destroyed when they win, and if their relic was destroyed, they win D3 times 10 creds if it was destroyed, like I said before. Experience for this one's pretty straightforward. You get 1 XP for surviving, and also you get 1 XP for the leader of each gang, and if they still have gang members on the battlefield by the end of the battle report is over with. The gangs also earn +1 reputation. They fight against each other for the very first time, and this is the very first time the Pelago-Slam Kings as well as the Sleeping Dogs have faced off, so both gangs will get 1 point of initiative. However, the losing gang suffers -2 of the reputation if their relic was destroyed, and the other gang, of course, gains 2 reputation if they destroy their enemy's relic. And at the same time, if any gang also bottles out, they lose 1 point of reputation as well. And that pretty much makes up the scenario rules for this one. So with scenario rules over with, we go directly to deployment. Alright, so here is deployment. Here is the overhead shot of the entire battlefield. We are fighting once again inside the tombs for my friend Brother Grimm. He's deploying the left-hand corner, while my other friend Sergeant Sigmary is deploying the far right-hand corner. As you can see, the Pelago-Slam Kings have their 2 relics set up. You have a barrel in the left-hand corner for the Pelago-Slam Kings. You have a pallet of crates on the right-hand side for the Sleeping Dogs on this part. And as you can see, both armies have kind of spread out along a vertical kind of pattern to get ready towards each other. And as you can see, we also have little blockages. Those represent doors. In order to open those up, the gangers will need to take an intelligence check in order to open those doors up as well. And so with that being said, let's go and zoom into the individual deployment areas and talk about where everything is located at. Alright, so starting with the Pelago-Slam Kings, as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, that's the barrel that represents the gang's relic. Guarding that up right up front, we have Fleshstick, that is a gang who's armed with a renderizer. Right next to him is Crank. That guy's armed with a combo stubber, that's a combination of a stub gun as well as a plasma gun as well. And then up taking point right there in the center portion there, that's Trimp the Shrimp. He's armed with a stub gun as well as a fighting knife. Right next to him on the left-hand side, you have Gage. That ganger is armed with an axe as well as a stub cannon, and right behind him is another Juve named Whack-A-Mole. That guy's armed with a stub gun as well as a spudjacker, and that pretty much makes it the defensive unit surrounding the relic for the Pelago-Slam Kings. And on the very top of the deployment area, starting from the back, you have Blitzkrieg Bob. That's the leader of the Pelago-Slam Kings. He's packing what you call a brute cleaver, as well as a grenade launcher, both frag as well as crack grenades. Right in the middle there, of course, you have Porter. That's another ganger who's armed with a stub cannon as well. He's got an axe as well as first place. And taking him to the very front end, of course, is the headhunter. That guy's also armed with a last gun as well as an axe. Now, if you'll notice, Grizz which is the gang's champion. This one who carries the Crump or Rivet gun. He's out of action right now because he's suffering from a grievous injury from his previous scenario. And that pretty much makes the deployment for the Pelago-Slam Kings. Alright, meanwhile across the battlefield we have the deployment for the Sleeping Dogs, making up the bottom left right hand corner of the tombs. It's not right in the middle there. You have Napalm Ned, that's a ganger's armed with a flamer. Up onto his right hand side, that's Reckless, who's a Juve armed with a stub gun as well as an auto pistol, and to his left is Ghost, who's another Juve armed with a sword as well as a stub gun. And then right behind him on the right hand side, that character is Miss Spectre. She's armed with mesh armor as well as a last gun. On the left hand side there, that's Silk. She's armed with mesh armor as well as an auto gun. And that pretty much makes up the offensive fire team for the Sleeping Dogs. And in the upper right hand corner where the relic is located at for the Sleeping Dogs, starting on the left hand side, that's Wesley, that's a ganger armed with a last gun. Right in the middle there, that's Mr. Smug, that character's armed with mesh armor as well as a bolt gun. And the far right hand side, that's Slick, that guy's another ganger armed with mesh armor as well as a shotgun as well. And they're going ahead and defending their relic from any attackers coming their way. And finally, off of the board over there in the upper right hand corner, that's my friend Sergeant Sigmarin's 3 members of his gang. That's Mr. Sinister, his leader, who's on the far right hand side, followed by Tiny, that's the guy who's in the middle, is armed with a grenade launcher. And finally, left hand side, it's Painless Joe, that's a champion that's armed with a plasma rifle, is what he's armed with. And these 3 guys are the champions as well as the leader for the gang. All 3 of these guys have the infiltration special role as a skill, so these guys will be able to deploy later on after the very first battle round. And that pretty much makes the deployment for this part. So with deployment all done, my friends roll off for initiative to see exactly as priority, and we start off with turn number 1. Alright, so the Pelago-Slam Kings managed to take part in this one. They go directly to the action phase. So starting off right off the bat, my friend, Brother Grimm, the first thing he does, he activates his gang champion, his gang leader, Blitzkrieg Bob. Because he's a gang leader, he can also activate 2 other fighters. He activates both Porter as well as the Headhunter. As you can see, what they quickly do is they just use a double movement to move their way towards the center portion of the table, heading directly towards the Sleeping Dogs' relic, as you can see there as well. That little door that's kind of blocking their path there, that one's we're going to represent that's a door. They need to pass an intelligence check by rolling 2d6 and beating their intelligence score in order to get that door opened. And that could be kind of risky for the Pelago-Slam Kings because there are 3 angry Sleeping Dogs right on the side of that door. So that makes it the action phase up here on the top of the table. Meanwhile, down the southern part of the tombs, as you can see in this photo, Ghost gets activated first. He does a double movement to occupy that center cavern right in the middle of the table, so that way he gets him in a good position, so that way he can engage anybody that comes down that center corridor, and at the same time he's out of the field of fire from anybody hitting him at this moment. And now to be outdone, Brother Grimm then activates Trip the Shrimp and also moves him up 4 inches to the center of the gantry as well. And as you can see in this little parallel here, Trip the Shrimp is in a good position, so that way he can actually, technically speaking, shoot at Ghost. Unfortunately for him though, he'll suffer a -1 hit penalty because he's in partial cover, but at the same time it's kind of a risk that my friend Brother Grimm is willing to take at this point. Unfortunately for Brother Grimm though, Trip the Shrimp did miss his shots because that nothing much really happened there. In response, my friend Sergeant Sigmarin then sends in Reckless as well, moves him up his normal 6 inches, that way he can start twin gunning it down with his his auto pistol as well as his stub gun against Trip the Shrimp. But even though they're really close together, he's unable to actually hit him because this is a Juve fight, and as we know, Juvies aren't really good at fighting or shooting at this point. They're more like cannon fodder, and so kind of an uneventful exchange of fire between these different gang members. In response to all the converging of the Sleeping Dogs coming down the corridor, my friend Brother Grimm then takes his second Juve, which is Whack-A-Mole, moves him up to that door, and actually has him spend one of his actions trying to perform an intelligence check to open that door. But unfortunately for my friend Brother Grimm, though, he wasn't able to pass that check, so because of that, the door still remains locked for the Pelago-Slam Kings. And because these male members of the Sleeping Dogs were unable to take care of the task, Sergeant Sigmarin sends in a woman to do a manager job by sending in Silk with her auto gun right behind Reckless. And because of her positioning, she can partially see Trip the Shrimp. So because of that, she does take aim with her auto gun, opens up with rapid fire, and not only does she manage to hit, but also manages to wound Trip the Shrimp as well. And not only does Silk manage to hit as well also to wound Trip the Shrimp, she also managed to put him out of action directly as well. If I remember correctly, she managed to believe she shot him 3 times using the rapid fire die. I believe 2 of them wounded. I think one of them wounded is ended up happening, and that one would end up being an out of action roll, is what it is. So because of that, Trip the Shrimp will need to roll up on the serious injury table to see exactly what happens to him. And sometimes it takes a woman to do a man's job, and she did it flawlessly. In retaliation for the gunshot that just took place, my friend Brother Grimm then moves up Porter, sorry, not Porter, moves up Gage, that's the Ganger's arm with a stub cannon, moves him into position right to that central corridor, so that way he lines up a perfect shot to open up with his stub cannon directly against, against Reckless, so he pops a shot and manages to hit him. Unfortunately, though, for my friend Brother Grimm, he wasn't able to successfully wound Reckless. All he managed to do was to pin him on that part. Reckless does get pushed back an inch because the knockback rules from the stub cannon that actually hit him, so that doesn't really do much of anything. But for the moment, though, he's just laying down. So because of that, Reckless will need to get back, spend an action to get back on his feet again, so that way he can engage his targets as well. And that pretty much makes it the action phase in the center corridor. And the rest of the action phase is pretty uneventful, so we're just going to show you exactly what the rest of the gang members did just moving around. First of all, as you can see right here in the bottom left-hand corner, my friend Brother Grimm decides to spend a double move onto Clunk, so that way he occupies a little bit of a support position right behind Gage, so that way if anything should happen, they have someone there to kind of lay down some fire with that combat pistol that he has. At the same time, the far left-hand corner, he also spends a double action movement to move Flesh Stick out of the corridor of the cavern where the relic is located as to occupy the junction. And the reason why it's spend a double move to move this guy 6 inches because on the last battle report, Flesh Stick has actually got hobbled, so because they only moves up forward 3 inches at a time. So this guy packs a punch, but he's slow as all get out. And that pretty much makes up the the action phase for the Pelago-Slam Kings on this side of the table. For the sleeping dogs on the southern part of the table, pretty much what my buddy Sergeant Sigmarine does is stack up his Delaques right down that center corridor. Right behind Silk, he has Napalm Ned, and right behind Napalm Ned, he has Miss Spectre or their last skin as well. So they're kind of stacking up so that way they can move in during the next priority phase. And finally, in the upper right-hand corner for the sleeping dogs, all 3 gang members just kind of reposition themselves in such a way so that way they can engage anybody that comes through that doorway there right between them. You got Wesley kind of shifts a little bit to the right so that way he has a better vantage point. Same thing with Mr. Slick. He also moves up forward as well so that we can blast anything that comes in with a shotgun right there in the center. And the very bottom there, you got Mr. Smug taking a position with his bolt gun to raid down some automatic fire anybody who comes through that way. And that pretty much makes it the action phase on this first turn. There really is no end phase because there's no one to roll for recoveries for, and there's no need to take a ball test at this point. So because of that, we go directly to the top of turn number 2 and we roll off for a priority on this one. Alright, so we start off with the action phase. Goliaths take the initiative on turn number 2. And as you can see in this photo, the very first thing that my friend does is that Brother Grimm activates his leader, Blitzkrieg Bob, who, because he's a gang leader, he can activate 2 other fighters. Right after he gets done activating him real quick, what he ends up doing then is having the headhunter activate the door real quick, and because they pass his intelligence test, the door automatically goes down. So because that fighter is activated, now Blitzkrieg Bob has a good field of fire for him to open up this grenade launcher. Alright, so not only does he manage to hit Slick with that grenade launcher, he also uses frag grenades, so because they get the large blast template there. And not only does he manage to hit Slick, he also managed to hit Wesley too, which is the Delaque who's in the top there with this last gun. And so because of that, not only does he hit both of them, but he also managed to wound both of them as well. And unfortunately for my friend Sergeant Sigmarine, because both these gangers got hit, he has to roll off for injury to see exactly what happens to him. Both of them rolled up seriously injured. So because that both these fighters are now laying down face down, he'll have to roll up again on the end phase to see if these guys recover. But this could prove to be very disastrous for Sergeant Sigmarine, because if those 2 fighters remain down and seriously injured, the headhunter can charge any one of those guys. If he does engage them in close combat, all he has to do is spend up an action turn doing a coup de grace, and he can finally just finish the guy off, which means that these 2 guys would go out of action pretty quickly if he doesn't do something to bounce back from really quick. And because they also get hit with their frag grenade as well, they both get shifted back an inch as well. And once again, because my friend also activated Blitzkrieg Bob, what's his name, Crank, which is this guy, I'm sorry, not Crank, this guy is Porter, I'm sorry. Because he gets activated as well, he does move up forward just a couple of inches directly into the center chamber there, so that we can take aim with a stub cannon. He opens up a shot and does manage to hit as well as wound Ghost, who's the juvie right there in the middle of the entryway. And aside from pushing him back an inch, the only thing he managed to do is to take away a flesh wound onto Ghost as well. So now Ghost is -1 to his toughness, will make him easier to wound. But at the same time, though, this gang member is still up on his feet. So with those actions first taken care of, we go now to the House Delaque members. And the first thing that my friend Sergeant Submarine does is that he brings his 3 members of his gang, both his leader, Mr. Sinister, which is there on the left-hand side, as well as Tiny, who's the champion armed with the grenade launcher, and the other guy, Painless Joe, who's another champion armed with a plasma gun, and he brings them in using the infiltrate special rule. So because of that, those 3 guys kind of pop up here in the left-hand flank of the Pelago-Slam Kings, and these guys are now within close proximity of getting towards my friend Brother Grimm's relic, as well as engaging Whack-A-Mole there, who's trying to open up that door there on the right-hand side as well. So moving on from there, we go back to the Goliath on this part. And unfortunately for Brother Grimm, he tries to activate Gage next to open up the stub cannon, but unfortunately for him though, he misses his shot. So because of that, we go directly to the house of Delaque, and the first thing that my buddy Sergeant Submarine does is he charges in Ghost and Gage to engage this guy Gage in close combat together, so that way they can start fighting it out. So because of that, we immediately go to the fight phase between these two. And not only does Ghost manage to hit, but he also managed to wound Gage, so because that Gage automatically goes out of action on that part, earning self-experience bonus point for Ghost as well, which is not pretty bad considering that this Juvie went up against a Ganger and a Goliath no less, and managed to wound him. My buddy Sergeant Submarine was rolling 6s on that one, 6 to hit as well as 6 to wound, so because of that he got off pretty lucky, and my friend Brother Grimm just kind of flubbed his save roll in order to protect him on that part. So meanwhile, my buddy's Brother Grimm activates Crank. He takes aim with his combat pistol using both the plasma pistol as well as a stub gun to open up on Ghost. Unfortunately for my friend Brother Grimm though, he flubbed his roll for his plasma gun. I think he rolled a 2, I think is what he ended up rolling, so because of that he was unable to hit Ghost. However, the stub gun did manage to hit Ghost, but unfortunately the only thing it caused was a flesh wound, so because of that now Ghost is down to a toughness 1. So that does make him easier to wound, but at the same time though, Ghost is still up on his feet, he can still fight in close combat, he can still shoot with his pistol, still a very deadly guy. So things are not going very well for Brother Grimm so far. And not to be outdone by Brother Grimm, my buddy Sergeant Submarine then sends in Reckless. That's his Juvie's armed with an auto pistol as well as a stub gun. He has him actually charge up to face off against Porter. So because of that, 2 of them engage in close combat, but unfortunately for them though, when they rolled off the dice and everything was said and done, basically ended up being a draw. Neither guy could really successfully land a blow onto the other one. So because of that, these 2 fighters will still be engaged in close combat, which is still kind of good because it does mean that Porter is stopping this, the Sleeping Dogs from flanking behind to Blitzkrieg Bob, but at the same time though, this guy's a Juvie, he's going up against a Ganger and a Goliath no less, who have really high strength as well as toughness, so things could not work out very well for Sergeant Grimm in the center chamber of the tombs. And to make things worse for Brother Grimm, he decides to charge in Flesh Stick, which is his Ganger's armed with a renderizer. He managed to get in close range of Ghost, but unfortunately, once again, the flubbery is just taking place over here. Both the Juvie as well as the Ganger were unable to hit each other at all during this close combat phase. So because of that, they both just kind of stared at each other, looking kind of intimidating, but that's really about the only thing these guys can do against each other. So close combat was pretty much ineffective on this side. Meanwhile, Sergeant Submarine also moves up Silk, that is the Ganger's armed with the auto gun, moves her up directly into the center chamber so that way she can lend some support for Reckless, just in case Reckless gets killed or in case they need to go another round of close combat, so that way she could add bonus attacks against Porter at this time. So that's what's happening over here in the center chamber. And because my buddy Brother Grimm does play Goliath with a YOLO in the air, he decides to send in Whack-A-Mole to take on Painless Joe, which is the champion armed with a plasma gun, and those 2 guys are engaged in close combat. And unfortunately for my friend Sergeant Submarine, this guy Whack-A-Mole actually just kind of rolled out of the box. Not only did he manage to hit Painless Joe twice, he also managed to wound him twice as well, putting that character out of action. Unfortunately for my buddy Sergeant Submarine, he was unable to save any of those rolls. So because of that, Whack-A-Mole does do his 2-inch follow through real quick, does a turn around and face down Mr. Sinister as well as Tiny. The only problem is though is that in the next turn these guys can open up on him and probably take him out if he's not too careful. So that pretty much makes it the action phase for the Goliaths over here in the left-hand flank. Meanwhile, not to be outdone by the House Goliath Pelago-Slam Kings, our buddy Sergeant Submarine decides to charge in Mr. Smug, that's the guy's armed with a bolt gun, and he engages in close combat with the Headhunter, which is a very un-Delaque thing to do, because Delaque are usually more for like sneaking around and shooting fools, not really engaging in close combat on this one. But I guess because you're fighting in the tombs, you're pretty much forced to engage in close combat because of the way terrain is set up. Unfortunately for my buddy Sergeant Submarine as well as Brother Grimm, these 2 guys are unable to wound each other right now, so because of that, both of them are just kind of staring at each other down, just looking mean and menacing for the next turn when it gets set up. And for the rest of the turn, because each of these guys is kind of moving independently one by one, we're just going to talk about real quick what ended up happening. As you can see in this picture, he decided to move up Miss Spectre as well. So now because the 2 female members of House Delaque are inside that center chamber, so that way they can lend some support for Reckless in case if he needs it for later on turns. At the same time, our friend also moves up Napalm Ned, which is his ganger arm of the Flamer, has him kind of take up positions there with his Flamer, so that way if anything should happen to Ghost, this guy can cut loose the Flamer and just engulf anybody coming down that hallway with some good old-fashioned Flamer attacks. And that takes place at the action phase here on the center portion of the board. So with the action phase over, we go directly to the end phase, and for the injury tables, my friend Sergeant Stingray rolls out for both Wesley as well as for for Slick. Unfortunately for him, he did roll up with these guys still being down, so because they're just laying out, just kind of bleeding, and what he does, he decides to shuffle them back 2 inches, that way they're out of the field of fire, and at the same time will not be able to get charged at the same time, if they do manage to get on their feet, they can still defend their relic here on the upper right hand corner. So with the end of the phase over with, we go directly to the top of turn number 3, and we roll off for initiative to see who goes first. Alright, so the top of turn number 3, the Goliath manages to steal priority again. So because of that, the first thing my buddy Brother Grimm decides to do is a charge and whack-a-mole against Mr. Sinister. So because of that, this Juvie is now to take on the leaders of the Sleeping Dogs. So the 2 of them engage in close combat with paired weapons. And unfortunately, my buddy Brother Grimm realizes you don't send a boy to do a man's job because Mr. Sinister managed to put the 2 degree on that guy within close combat. In case you guys didn't know, Mr. Sinister is packing twin bolt guns, so because that causes 2 damage as well as strength 4 in the close combat, and because that he just managed to put that poor Juvie into the ground. So because of that, Whack-A-Mole will need to roll up on the Sinner's injury table to see exactly what happens to him, and at the same time, Mr. Sinister gains an experience point and additional experience points for putting somebody out of action. So because of that, we now go directly to the Sleeping Dogs for the rest of their action phase. And what he decides to do is disengage close combat with Reckless against Gage right there. Sorry, not Gage, Porter, which is up there in the top. So because of that, Reckless does dive back a little bit. While it may not seem very impressive, what it does do, however, is open up options for my buddy Sergeant Stingray for his ladies, Miss Spectre, as well as Silk, who could open up at close range on Porter and manage to put him out of action as well. At the same time, if Porter decides to charge at any one of these ladies as well, they'll be able to do Overwatch real quick and hopefully be able to wound him that way as well, putting themselves a little distance between this Goliath member and the rest of his gangs. And now to be outdone by the Sleeping Dogs, the next thing that my friend does is that Brother Grimm activates his gang leader, Blitzkrieg Bob. He decides to keep Blitzkrieg Bob exactly where he's at, so that way he doesn't cause any more damage for himself, so that way he can open up with his grenade launcher. He also decides to keep his friend, what's his name, the Headhunter, located right where he is as well, so that way he can engage people in close combat if he needs to. And at the same time, pulls Porter out of the center portion of the board and moves more to the left-hand side, so that way he's not in the field of fire, both Silk as well as Miss Spectre. At the same time, Blitzkrieg Bob does open up with his grenade launcher with a crack grenade directly onto Slick over there on the right-hand side. Not only does he manage to wound that guy, he also manages to put him out of action as well. So because that, Slick will need to roll off on the series injury table to see exactly what happens to him. Meanwhile, on the other side, my friend Sergeant Stingray activates Mr. Sinister, the leader of the Sleeping Dogs, and he has him do a double movement from that left-hand column, corridor rather, all the way up, so that way he was within the intersection there on the top of the screen, so that way he can shoot at Porter if he decides to run that way as well. And at the same time, he also spends one single action to move Tiny over to where Crank is located out just off the screen, because he's going to take aim with his grenade launcher, firing a crack grenade at Crank. Not only does Tiny manage to hit Crank, he also managed to wound him as well, and unfortunately for my buddy Brother Grimm, the Crank does go out of action, so because that, Crank will need to roll up on the serious injury table to see exactly what happens to him at the end of the scenario as well. Meanwhile, for the Pelago-Slam Kings, I forgot to take a photo of the close combat phase, but what ended up happening is that Fleshstick had no problem whatsoever just wounding as well as putting out of action Ghost. So because that Ghost will need to roll up on the serious injury table, and so he does do a 2-inch fall through getting closer to Napalm Ned, but as you can see in this photo, my buddy Sergeant Stingray activates Napalm Ned and actually has him cut loose with his flamer against Fleshstick. However, as crazy as it may sound, Fleshstick actually does survive being burnt alive by a flamer. Only thing that happens is that he does manage to suffer a flesh wound, so because that Fleshstick is a little bit easier to wound. However, my friend Sergeant Stingray also failed his engulf test to see if this guy catches on fire, so because that, Fleshstick just keeps on going, because as we all know, Fleshstick is a freaking maniac. For the remainder of the action phase, it's pretty much the sleeping dogs having one ganger being activated one at a time, so we're just going to talk about exactly what happened for the rest of the action phase. As you can see in this photo, the first thing that my buddy Sergeant Sigmarine does is that he activates Silk, has her move up to the corridor where Blitzkrieg Bob is located at, also has her take aim and open fire with her autogun, and we're going to talk exactly what happened here in a second, and also lend some support from this for Silk. He also moves up Miss Spectre, who's the ganger arm of the last gun, so that way she can kind of add for backup protection on that part as well. So anyways, back to what we were talking about with Silk. Silk takes aim with her autogun and manages to hit Blitzkrieg Bob 3 times with the rapid fire ability. But luckily for my buddy Brother Grimm, all the thing that happens to him, she did manage to hit him but was unable to wound him. So because that Blitzkrieg Bob is now pinned, that's why he's laying down face up, so that way he can get back on his feet and do, spend a point just moving that during the action phase, that we can get back to it. So with the action phase over with, we go directly to the end phase. And at the end of the end phase, because so many people have taken so many losses with the sleeping dogs, my buddy Sergeant Sigmarine has to take a bottle test. As you can see in this result here, my buddy Sergeant Sigmarine rolled a 1. So because of the sleeping dogs aren't going anywhere. But unfortunately for the Pelago-Slam Kings, my buddy Brother Grimm did roll a 6, so because of that, the Pelago-Slam Kings do lose their bottle test. So because of that, in his next turn, he's got to make sure that each of his gangers has to take a cool check, and if they fail the cool check, they just end up running off the battlefield to fight another day. So because of that, the Pelago-Slam Kings will also suffer -1 to the reputation for bottling out. Alright, since the beginning of the Pelago-Slam Kings, for turn number 4, they managed to take priority again on this turn, so my buddy Brother Grimm is doing pretty good. But unfortunately for him though, he has to take bottle checks for each of his members of his gang, and the very first person he tests for is for Blitzkrieg Bob. Unfortunately for my buddy Brother Grimm, he does fail his cool check for his leader, so because that, his leader decides to hightail out of it, because after being shot 3 times with auto gun, he's not going to take any more chances, he's running for the hills. And because his leader took off, the headhunter also decided to take off as well, failing his cool check, and he is vacating the premises because he doesn't want to die either. And that pretty much makes it the opening phase for the cool test. So because that, the rest of the Pelago-Slam Kings do pass their cool test, the next thing my friend does is decide to activate Flesh Stick. And as you can see in this photo, my buddy decides to charge in Flesh Stick against Tiny, so that way those two engage in close combat. But unfortunately for him though, Flesh Stick didn't fail all of his hit rolls, and so because of that, nothing much really happens. Tiny also did manage to hit Flesh Stick, but unfortunately was unable to wound him. So because of that, these two gang members now are just staring at each other intently, because neither one of them can actually put the other down in close combat at this point. And as a last-ditch effort, my buddy Brother Grimm decides to spend the rest of his turn moving up his last remaining ganger, which is Porterberry there on the top. He actually has that guy do a double move, running towards the intersection, making his way towards the relic, because if he's lucky, he can probably destroy the relic and hopefully, kind of regain some more reputation points from bottling out. But that pretty much makes the action phase on this one. This picture also illustrates the end phase as well, because the only ganger that's still down was Wesley, and as you can see, Wesley's now back up on his feet because he took a flesh wound at that part. So he's a little bit easier to wound, but at the same time though, Wesley's still not out of the game yet. So with the end phase over, we go directly to the top of turn number 5 and roll for initiative to see who goes first. Alright, so the top of turn number 5, the Delaque manages to take the priority this time. The first thing that he does, my buddy Sergeant Sigmarine activates his gang champion, which is Tiny, who also activates Napalm Dead because he's in range. The two of them also move up forward, so that way they're within range of the relic for the Pelago-Slam Kings, and they both decide to take aim with their weapons and open up on that relic, because if they manage to destroy it, they earn 2 reputation points for themselves as well as win the scenario. And as you can see in this photo, it actually took both these gangers to destroy the relic. The very first one was actually a flamer shot from Napalm Ned, but unfortunately for him, he was unable to wound it. And my friend Sergeant Sigmarine then took aim with Tiny, who opened up with a crack grenade against the relic. Not only did he manage to hit it, but he also managed to wound it as well as destroy the relic as well, thus bringing about the end of the scenario. And as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, that takes us directly to the end of the game, with the sleeping dogs in it for the win by destroying the other opponent's relic. So that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go to the after action report and to go to the post game and talk about exactly what happened to each of these gangers. Alright folks, now it's time for the post game. This is the part of the battle report we talk about exactly what happened to the fate of each of the gangs at the end of the scenario. This is the post game for Underhive Wars Necromunda battle report number 7. It was a border dispute scenario. So first off, let's start off with the Pelago-Slam Kings. The first thing we're going to talk about is injuries. So because of the number of injuries the Pelago-Slam Kings took, there was 5 of them. Let's go and talk about all 5 of those guys real quick. Flesh Stick, Gage, Trip the Shrimp, as well as Whack-A-Mole all rolled out for out colds because they make full recoveries and they'll be back again for the next scenario. However, Crank, that ganger ended up suffering a humiliated score, so because of that he has -1 to his cool as well as leadership, and he also goes recovery, which means he will miss 1 game for his next scenario as well. For advancements, my buddy Brother Grimm decided to spend a couple of his experience points. Blitzkrieg Bob leveled up to level 2, earning +1 to his leadership score. Fleshstick also leveled up to level 2 as well, getting +1 to his movement, so because of that his hobbled injury is not really going to affect him too much. He can move up 4 inches now like everybody else. Gage also leveled to level 2 as well, earning +1 to his cool, and Trip the Shrimp also leveled up as well to level 2 for Juvie, also earning +1 to his cool as well. In the end, they decided to go to the merchant. They decided to work the territory, earning themselves 60 creds, and in the end, my buddy Brother Grimm took the remaining creds in his stash, as well as the 60 he took from the territory, and he hired a new recruit. This guy is a new champion named Rager, and now Rager is armed with a combat shotgun as well. For the reputation, the Pelago-Slam Kings did gain +1 reputation for fighting for the Sleeping Dogs for the first time, but they lost that point of reputation for balling out as well. And to make things worse, they suffered 2 points of reputation loss for having their relic being destroyed. Now this would drop them down to 0 normally, but because of the difference in gang ratings between the Pelago-Slam Kings as well as the Sleeping Dogs, the Pelago-Slam Kings do get +1 reputation for the gang difference, and it basically brings up their total for 1 point of reputation as well. For the turf, the Pelago-Slam Kings are still stuck at 1 hex for their turf. They do manage to earn 50 credits from that turf, which they then use to hire Rager with and get his weapons as well. That brings their new gang rating now to 1,280 points, and their new record right now is at 0 wins and 3 losses. So things are not looking very good for the Pelago-Slam Kings on this campaign either. Alright, and finally for the Sleeping Dogs. For injuries, they had 3 people who were injured. That was Painless Joe, Slick, as well as Ghost. Painless Joe and Ghost rolled out cold for the recovery, so because they made full recoveries, and they don't have to worry about missing a game. However, Slick, he did suffer humiliation for his injury, so because of that he has -1 to his cool and for his leadership, and you'll also have to miss out another game because he's recovering from his injuries. For advancements, my buddy Sergeant Stingray decided to spend a couple of points for his advancements. For Mr. Sinister, he actually cashed in a lot of his points to make that guy level 2, and he had enough points for him to roll up for his another skill for this guy, and he got the Overseer skill, so because of that makes Mr. Sinister even deadlier when giving out orders for his troops. He also spent up a couple of experience points for Tiny, leveling up to level 2 as well, earning +1 to his Ballistic skill, so because of that now Tiny is packing a 2-up Ballistic skill rating. In the end, they managed to steal 2 turf in this scenario, as well as working their turf. They earned 30 credits from working their turf. They then also earned 50 credits from the scenario, earning another 80 credits for having these characters work the turf as well. They then took all their remaining their creds. Sorry, I'm thinking of Fallout. They took the remaining of their creds and also decided to buy new guys. The first thing they did is they recruited a new juvie named Noob. They equipped that guy with an auto pistol as well as a maul. They also purchased a melt-a-gun from Mr. Sinister, so now their leader is packing a special weapon, and they placed the remaining 20 credits into their stash as well. When it comes to reputation, they earned +1 reputation points for fighting against the Pelago-Slam Kings for the first time, and they also earned 2 reputation points for destroying the Pelago-Slam King's relic, and that gives them a total pool of 8 reputation at this point. Their new game rating now is at 1,370 points, and their new record now is at 3 wins as well as 0 losses. So that's good to do for this one, you guys, from Necromunda Underhive Wars Battle Report number 7. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is invaluable as always. Also, check us on Facebook, Instagram, Google+, as well as Blogger for all the latest and greatest what's going on for hobby. That's good to do for this one, you guys. You guys stay classy. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.